the concept of India as a secular, multipolar, plural state will be demolished along with the mosque.
Just by Aurangzeb demolishing the temple, suddenly you become the owner of the mosque.
What happened in Sambhal is the most recent example of how this is a ticking bomb.
History can't be used as a weapon to take revenge or to undo. You can't undo history.
Tomorrow, what if someone said that there could be remains of a Shiva temple under the Taj Mahal? Would we be willing to excavate that?
Why not? Excavate. I'm not saying demolish.
Isn't that the nature of the beast? I mean, that is what invaders used to do.
And if we allow politicians to use history as a weapon and build a homogeneous monocultural societies, I think we become culturally that much poorer.
He says Ayodhya, Mathura, Kashi are important because they were not built as places of worship. They were victory monuments to establish the dominance of the invader.
If the Supreme Court does not strike down or something, this act will be repealed by the government itself.
Because of the Hindu being secular, this country remained the way it was in the 50 years.
It's the one-year anniversary of the Pran Pratishtha ceremony or consecration of the grand Ram Mandir in Ayodhya, which marked the culmination of a centuries-old dispute and the return of beloved Ram Lalla to his home. Last year's ceremony was attended by people of all faiths in an atmosphere that was a celebration of India's diversity. But has this event opened a Pandora's box of sorts? A year later, we are witnessing a plethora of petitions registered across district courts demanding surveys of several mosques or shrines that are believed to have been built on destroyed temples. Many groups and individuals are now challenging the constitutional validity of the act, saying it violates several fundamental rights, including the right to equality and freedom to practice religion. And I'm joined by the executive editor of the Free Press Journal, Afrida Ali.
Thank you, Anushka. It's my pleasure, my privilege, my honor to actually be part of this conversation. The reason we thought we should do this is also because we are sitting at a time, as Anushka mentioned, completed 1 year of the inauguration of the Ram Temple. There is a very crucial hearing on the validity of the Places of Worship Act, which is coming up on the 17th of February. And we just had the Congress party file an intervention petition in this, saying that law is required to protect our religious places, and therefore, of course, in direct reference to the Places of Worship Act, says we need these acts, these constitutional provisions to preserve and protect communal harmony in this country. So clearly there are 2 points of view. Anushka will lead the conversation with a distinguished panel. Go ahead, Anushka.
Yes, to introduce our eminent panel, we have leading senior advocate Aspi Chinoy, who's very well regarded for his practice in the Bombay High Court. We have Irfan, engineer, Director of the Center for Study of Society and Secularism. We have well-known solicitor Rajan Jaykar, who is one of the foremost collectors of antiques and artifacts and memorabilia in India and has a wealth of interesting historical knowledge. Let's start off with the legal aspect. The constitutional validity of this act has been challenged. Aspi, I'd like to address the first question to you. Let's look at the legal angle. First of all, we know the Places of Worship Act, enacted in 1991, says that the religious character of a place of worship would remain as it was on August 15, 1947, the only exception being the Ram Janmabhoomi Babri Masjid dispute. Currently, the petitioners, who include people like Ashwini Kumar Upadhyay, Dr. Subramaniam Swamy, former Rajya Sabha member, people from the Kashi royal family, and many religious leaders, they have challenged sections of the Places of Worship Act, saying it violates several fundamental rights, including the right to equality, as enshrined in Article 14 and Article 15, which prohibits any kind of discrimination based on religion. What is your view on the constitutional validity of this act?
I think I must divert a bit, because I don't think the mere constitutional validity with certain articles of the Constitution either raises the right question or answers the right question. You have to go back to what is the real underlying conflict which is there in this act and the challenge to it. And I know it means a quick historical lesson, but if it can be done in a couple of minutes, it's worth doing.
Yes.
You know, we must remember that there have been competing versions of the idea of India. And that happened in the 20s and 30s. At the time of independence, clearly the constitutionalists had the day. Don't forget that the Constituent Assembly was 80% Hindu. But under the leadership of people like Nehru, Ambedkar, even Sardar Patel, they adopted a constitution which was based as a political entity on every citizen who resided there, irrespective of caste, creed or religion. And this was a world view, a national view, completely at odds with the view of the VHP, the Janasangh, which said that India was a cultural entity and you couldn't divorce the culture of the majority and expect a national entity to identity to be formed. 1947, the constitutionalists had the day. This view continued, I would think, right up to the end of the 90s. After that, there has been a strong ascendancy to depart from constitutionalism as an abstract entity and go on to the cultural content of the nation. It's an ethnicity more than a nationality. And that is the backdrop into which this legislation comes in.
Yes.
Don't forget, it was enacted in 1991.
Yes.
1 year later was the demolition of the Babri Masjid in 1992. This was exempted from there.
Yes.
But it was intended at the time when the Congress government was the center to prevent retrogression. In other words, can you allow an inquiry into history as a means of political consolidation? The other view is, and has been even at that time, that unless you allow us to go back to history, that's actually pseudo-secularism. Because we are entitled to show you the inequities and injustices that were heaped on Hindus in those 400-500 years. And not allowing us to do that is to denude us of this chance of building a cohesive movement on that.
Yes.
So this law was to prevent non-retrogression,
Absolutely.
to prevent you from opening up the wounds of histories
Yeah.
to destroy your todays and tomorrows.
Yeah.
The counter view is that if we don't go back there, you don't get the real India and the real mobilization.
Right.
So these Article 14, 15 and 26 are all very well. But the real issue is this.
But a quick counter follow-up to that would be that, you know, that's the whole idea of having a constitution, the whole idea of having a certain framework that everyone adheres to, where your constitution makers decided that, well, like you said, there will be competing views, there will be contradictions, but this is the document that we go with. Every country has that, every progressive nation has that. So are you not in a way undermining the whole idea of having a constitution by saying, okay, till one point we had this and then beyond that, there was an ascendancy of this view and we must accommodate it. Should we be accommodating it?
But Madam, the only issue which I'd like to point out is that words mean many things, as said in Alice in Wonderland. And constitutions also mean many things, even if their words are intact. For example, secularism as a basic structure of the constitution is met by the counter view of appeasement and pseudo-secularism. So one man's secularism is another man's appeasement in these circumstances. So your constitution will continue, but it will mean different things depending on who wields power, depending on who guards the constitution.
As you said, the real narrative is two opposing views on the idea of India.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We have the RSS VHP view, we have the Nehruvian view. It's these two opposing views. Coming to, you mentioned secularism and pseudo-secularism, which is very, very interesting, because a lot of people who swing more towards the right will tell you that the Congress and others are not really secular. They're pseudo-secular because they don't really care about the majority. They don't care about the majority. And I've heard this view being said by many BJP politicians that the opposition is pseudo-secular. Coming to that, people, the petitioners who have challenged the constitutional validity of this act, have actually said that it goes against the very principle of secularism enshrined in Articles 26 and 27. So, Mr. Jaykar, I wanted your view on this. And they also say date that is chosen is very unfair to Hindus, Buddhists, Sikhs, and it favors one community, which of course they mean the Muslims. What is your view on this act? Should it be amended? Is it constitutionally valid? What's your view?
See, this act is passed at a time when the BJP was in the ascendancy. Okay? This act, in spite of the act, it could not prevent the demolition of the Babri Masjid. Why is it that the Ram Janmabhoomi thing is excluded out of this? Supreme Court has given a unanimous verdict in that case, which also had incidentally a Mohammedan judge, and that is unanimous. The matter is settled, but the judgment did not say that the mosque should be built there. So they found out a via media of giving a particular portion of land to the affected party while the Ram temple is being built. So in my opinion, if there are so many other Muslim religious places, and there should be an archaeological survey should be conducted, because the act does not prevent filing of a suit. The question is, all right, today there is a mosque. Whoever is the owner of the mosque, how did that person become owner, or that institution become owner of the mosque? Just by Aurangzeb demolishing the temple, suddenly you become the owner of the mosque? The act doesn't prevent anybody from saying, I want to examine the title. Act doesn't prevent anybody from saying, I want to understand whether under the mosque is there any evidence of temple. So archaeological survey is well within this.
But Mr. Jaykar, what happened in Sambhal is in front of you. I mean, you are saying that surveys are allowed. You can't stop researchers. You can't stop exploration and excavation. That's what ASI does.
Yes.
And you can't prevent ASI from doing so. But, you know, are you not firing from the shoulders of ASI in the sense that what happened in Sambhal is the most recent example of how this is a ticking bomb? You don't want the country to go up in flames like this.
Why should it go up in flames?
Why do you have 18 litigations coming up after that of various places across the country? What will it do to this country? It will tear us asunder.
So therefore, the injustices carried out for last so many years have to be just guided. It's like the exodus from the Kashmir Valley of the Hindus. Supreme Court said it is too old now, so therefore no justice. People who are massacred, they are removed from their houses, they should just remain wherever they are and be happy about it.
But the question would also be, how far back are you willing to go? Will
As
you go
far as back
500 years, 1000 years?
No, it can't be 1000 years. It has to be
But living in today's times, you really think you can get justice or avenge the wrongs of the past committed 500 to 1000 years ago? Do you really think that should be your agenda for a country like us?
Simple thing is, follow the formula which is there in the Ayodhya matter. If there is a temple which is found existing, remove the mosque, give them a place, they'll put a mosque there. What is the problem?
But the whole idea of the Places of Worship Act is to look forward and not back.
Yes.
Isn't the history of every nation, every civilization full of invasions, conquering? Look at Alexander the Great. Look at the history of every land on the face of this earth. The thing is, I mean, how much can you go back and undo? It's not that we're a country which has no other issues to take care of. So, Irfan, engineer, would you like to weigh in on this?
Yeah, I think this act is based on secularism of the country. Secularism is part of basic structure of our Indian constitution. If this country is very diverse, we should remember. Not only religiously diverse, but culturally diverse, linguistically diverse, diverse traditions, customs, etc., etc. The People of India project said that there are 4,635 different peoples and culture. And everybody has history. Everybody constructs their history, and there will be endless conflict. The freedom of religion means freedom of religion to practice religion as it is now and not go into disputes, because as you rightly asked, how far back in history will you go? In Patan, for example, Gujarat, Jain temples were demolished and Hindu temples were constructed. In Kashmir, for example, Buddhist temples were demolished by Raja Harshvardhan, and Kavi Kalhan has written that history of demolition of Buddhist temples to wipe out Buddhism from Kashmir and establish Hinduism there. I think this act protects all communities. Buddhists are ready to claim that all the Hindu temples were constructed after demolishing Buddhist viharas, and so on and so forth. So how far back you will go? In the Ayodhya judgment, Supreme Court mentions this act and says, now we can't go back in history, other religious places being established. And to respond to Mr. Jaykar's view that Ayodhya type, it won't be a solution. Not only Ayodhya type, Buddhists and Jains and other communities, are supposing they bring out and demand Ayodhya type, what all you will survey? Will we invest our time and energy in just investigating all these places of worship, and there are lakhs and lakhs of places of worship? Yes, I do agree that wherever demolitions have taken place in history, history is for us to learn lessons from history. History can't be used as a weapon to take revenge or to undo. You can't undo history.
I think I'll just pick up from that point, Anushka, and ask Mr. Jaykar this, that isn't that the nature of the beast? I mean, that is what invaders used to do. Every invader had the same pattern. They would come in, demolish the structures that existed, build their own structures. And today that is part of our country's history. So much of Mughal architecture is part of our history. The Taj Mahal is a World Heritage Site. So the problem is that in whatever you were also saying, that we draw from history and we have this cultural entity which must be preserved. Drawing from what Mr. Irfan Engineer said, I want to ask you that question, that how are you going to even go about correcting the wrongs of the past when you know that across the world invaders did this, not just India?
The question is, as far as India is concerned, who are the invaders? Did the Hindu invade India or somebody else invaded India? So if the invaders have invaded and destroyed certain places of worship, that should be just taken as a part of the history.
No, it's not just places of worship. All the existing structures, they would want their stamp of their rule to be there.
I'm talking right now of structures which come under the provisions of the Act. Yeah.
Okay.
So they are all destroyed. It is historically recorded. It's not somebody who has just said out of the blue without any evidence. So if it is historically destroyed, and if you still find that there is a evidence of some portion of it still existing, what does it mean? That everything has to be frozen as it is?
But isn't that the nature of most civilizations? Just to argue from that point of view, I understand that, of course, nobody is denying the atrocities of invaders. There were a lot of atrocities committed, a lot of, let's say, gurukuls, temples, Sanskrit schools destroyed. Yes, that happened. But what I think Afrida was saying is that, isn't that a part of every, and what I did say before, isn't that a part of every civilization? And doesn't this now, don't you think that some of these mosques like Fatehpur Sikri, or Mughal era buildings, Fatehpur Sikri, and whether it's a mosque in Sambhal, and some of these other great buildings, Jama Masjid in Delhi, don't you think that those also become a part of Indian culture? Look, don't we call Mughlai food also Indian food? Right? It's Mughlai food, but we have adopted it as our own cuisine. Don't we say that the Taj Mahal is an Indian monument? It is. Tomorrow, what if someone said that there could be remains of a Shiva temple under the Taj Mahal? Would we be willing to excavate that?
Why not? Excavate. I'm not saying demolish. Find out what is the fact. Why are you running away from the fact?
And who does it help though?
It helps the history.
So you are saying we should stop at the research, and you are not in favor of going ahead with demolishing and restoring, because there you are making a very important point. You are saying you should know. Your point is about acquiring that knowledge. Am I getting you right?
Yeah, acquiring the knowledge and also finding out how whoever has built it has become the owner of that place.
But in the process you disturb peace and harmony. Is that worth?
Why should the peace and harmony?
To pay for it?
Why should the peace and harmony be disturbed? Why should the other party not feel that yes, my predecessors have made these atrocities? Well, I have to face the consequence. Why not?
But will it stop at non-invasive survey? Will it stop? I mean, how? Aspi, what are your views on this?
It would be absurd to suggest that the quest is for knowledge. The quest is for political mobilization by going back, by retrogressively looking at what happened in history to mobilize a particular point of view today. So knowledge is not at all the issue. And I just correct Mr. Jaykar on one part. In 91, the BJP was not ascendant. It had 3 members in parliament. In 94, in the Bombay judgment, 9 judges said that even governments which don't support secularism can be removed. And it's a basic structure. It was in the years thereafter, in the Ram Janmabhoomi mobilization, that the tide swung in that sense. And basically, there is the issue. You see, in 1947, 10% of India's population was Muslim. And therefore, a conscious choice was taken that because of the plurality of our people, we went in for a secular constitution. Now what I'm hearing is that no, this constitution, this secular constitution is an impediment. Let us go back to our cultural roots, find out who oppressed us, use that as a means of mobilization to oppress them, to destroy their masjids and temples. That's the problem is it's sophistry, but actually it's really an attempt to wreak vengeance through the views of history.
Because, you know, where
As
are the
political
guardrails? Yeah.
political mobilization. Look, why did it not happen till 91? All the temples were there, everyone knew what had happened. From 47 to 91, why did no one ask any questions, do anything much? It's really politicians who seek a sense of iniquity as a basis of mobilization of their cadre. And that's really what you're facing.
So then there is a danger here, Mr. Irfan Engineer, because then what we are saying, and if I'm getting Mr. Aspi Chinoy correctly, that there are vested interests, they have their agendas, there are political agendas, and here are a bunch of people who are managing to radicalize the rest of us, managing to influence, and therefore today we have this situation where you are even now going to the extent of challenging the constitution or the provisions of the constitution. Do you sense a certain threat inherent in this? Because again, like Anushka said, a Pandora's box was opened with Ayodhya, or but then there could be a new precedent set if the Places of Worship Act is amended. That would again open up Pandora's box of amending multiple other things.
I tend to agree with Mr. Aspi Chinoy in what he said. History is being made a tool for political mobilization. Now, history has, Mughals are not the only ones who invaded India. Before that, the Huns invaded India. Kushanas invaded India. The Buddhists were wiped out from this after Ashoka's rule. Now, the Huns brought their culture. Kushanas brought their culture. Mughals brought that culture. All that culture got absorbed in. It's not just places of worship, but culture in sense of cuisine, music, clothes, many other things, many architecture. They brought this only enriched India. Now, actually, it's not just demolition of mosques and temple rebuilding to purify culture. How far in history again you will go culturally? Will you expel, say, biryani from Indian culture or jalebi from Indian culture or clothes? Why should we be afraid of getting influenced by all culture and adopting all culture? Gandhiji very rightly said that let the doors and windows of my house be open so that winds from all directions flow in. But let me be rooted, let my house be rooted so much that the winds don't blow off my house. So let's not be afraid of. Hindu philosophy says Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. Entire world is my family. The Supreme Court itself does not accept that there was a Ram temple below that mosque which was demolished in order to construct this mosque. There are several historians who dispute that there was a Ram Janmabhoomi temple. Now, there is no consensus on history, and if we allow politicians to use history as a weapon and build a homogeneous monocultural societies, I think we become culturally that much poorer.
Very interesting, actually.
Yeah, that's an interesting take on things. Of course, as you said, this is a weaponization of history. That is your view. That's a weaponization. The other side says that, of course, there was bloodshed, there were atrocities, there were forced conversions, and yes, all that did happen, right? There were a lot of bad things that happened, as you have pointed out to some of the good things that happened. So one side wants to redress all those bad things that happened, which is understandable that there would be people who want to do that. But my saying is that a lot of these mosques that are standing there are from the 16th century. No present day Hindu has ever worshipped in those temples that were supposedly destroyed. So it's as such no loss to the present day Hindus in this community. We do have thousands and thousands of gorgeous temples all over India. So the point is, why resurrect all these previous ones when nobody who's currently living in Bharat or India has ever worshipped in those previous temples?
The answer is in the question.
Yeah.
Because it's not about the temple and it's not about the mosque. It's about politicizing a situation for maybe short-term or long-term goals. There's no doubt about that.
So it's purely political agenda.
Of course, you create a sense of grievance. You then use that sense of grievance to mobilize people. And you use that for political benefits.
Mr. Jaykar, do you agree?
No, that could be the politicians' take on this. They might be doing that. But otherwise, but same thing was with Babri Masjid. Nobody was doing anything there. It was just lying as a relic. So why such a big hullabaloo?
I think Mr. Jaykar could answer that question in that question. Why such a big hullabaloo? Because the Ram Janmabhoomi movement, though opened by the Congress erroneously in 1986,
Yes.
was used for political mobilization by the Jana Sangh and the BJP. No doubt about
Now
that.
the hullabaloo is because these temples are used by present day Indians. I am not naming communities. So what Anushka raised is, you want to fight for something that no present day Indians ever knew.
But their ancestor did.
Whereas the ones that are being disputed are legitimate places of worship where the community is using.
No, but if you are talking about temples with 200 years ago, obviously there is nobody living who
Yes.
could have used it. But those temples were built not only as a structure, because there were people who must have been worshipping there. Why would they build a temple otherwise? So you cannot say that just because somebody is not living today, who could have worshipped in a 200, 300 years ago, it's not possible physically.
But maybe what Jaykar could tell us is what is the purpose of resurrecting this question at this time in our national status? And
In
saying,
our stream of priorities.
Yeah, and going back and saying, let's find all the temples which were destroyed to build mosques, then let's destroy all those mosques to rebuild what? Temples. And in the consequence, where will India be? The concept of India as a secular, multipolar, plural state will be demolished along with the mosques. Let's be very clear about that. One doesn't survive without the other.
But isn't that what people want? They want this so-called secular idea of India to be demolished. There is a large group of people who actually want
But
that.
if you accept that, I accept it.
Yeah.
If you say that India should cease to be a secular state and should be an ethno-cultural state,
Then it
then your
becomes fair.
actions are completely consistent. But then you destroy everything of the essence of the Indian constitution.
Is
Let's
that,
be clear.
Are you in agreement with that? That you are going to destroy the whole ethos when you do this?
No,
of
no.
this
The
country?
thing is that you feel it is destroyed if the people start thinking that way. So the people who are thinking that it will be destroyed are not saying that the whatever was done in the past was not wrong. They are not saying so. So therefore, what is destroyed is it's a question of somebody's perception.
Yeah, I want to ask Mr. Irfan Engineer the question about appeasement. This is a word we hear a lot because a large section of the majority community feel that for very many decades, the party that ruled this country was operating on an appeasement policy to stay in power. And therefore, there was nobody who could stand up for the rights of the majority community. Now, finally, you have a messiah. Now, finally, you have somebody who can speak for restoring the old glory. Why should he not? Because prior to this, the party in power did not have it in their political agenda because it did not suit their political ambition. They were operating on appeasement. Therefore, the community now feels that now is the time. Now is the time.
What you are calling or what they were calling as appeasement has to be questioned, has to be deconstructed rather than questioned. Partly I would accept that there was to some extent.
Yeah, the Shah Bano case, multiple examples.
Partly I would accept. But if you see how that appeasement operated, socially, culturally, economically, it further and further marginalized the Muslim community. The Sachar Committee report brings that out, that they were discriminated in employment, in education, in everything. To some extent, fundamentalist section of the Muslim community could get their cultural agenda accepted. That is the Sharia, Muslim personal law, because it affected nobody else. It didn't affect any other community. It affected women of the Muslim community. And the Congress's appeasement was of the nature, well, if you want your women to be oppressed, so be it, oppress your women. You know, that kind of a angle or that kind of a perspective we can see. Partly for electoral purposes, but also that was the idea of secularism.
The perception is that these were the decades where you had it your way and now we will have it our way.
I'm saying, to which I'm saying, that Muslims did not have their way. It was a template that was being followed. Trump accuses the Democrats of appeasing the immigrants. All democratic parties in Europe are accused by right-wing parties of appeasing the migrants from Asia and other immigrants, right? So the word appeasement was used, but I don't think it was inappropriate. They were in fact, this term appeasement hides the discrimination of Muslim community socially, educationally, that's what it hides.
I would also like to just make one comment. Till Nehru, I think we were certainly true secularists. But in the years that followed Nehru, it was more a political use of secularism for power, even on the Congress's side. The Congress made the greatest transgressions in many areas. The Muslim
lines blurred
Women's
between
Bill.
appeasement and secularism.
No, and therefore they eroded the content of secular values. So much so that when the BJP and its allies started attacking, this was fragile ground.
So I want to just move to another issue. I want to move to an observation made by D.Y. Chandrachud, the former Chief Justice of India, in May 2022. And this is again to do with the Places of Worship Act, the legality of it. He said at that point that the Places of Worship Act 1991 does not prohibit the ascertainment of religious character of any place. It may prevent the conversion of a place, but that does not mean you can't determine its true religious character, which we spoke about earlier. Now, I want to ask you first, Aspi, do you agree with his interpretation?
So I think the judge was way off the mark. The Act says you freeze matters as on 1947. If your inquiry was what was the character in 1947, yes. But asking what was the character now is completely destructive of the Act. If you freeze it as on that date, what is the point of an inquiry into what is its character today?
Yeah. So you feel that observation, you totally feel
Unfortunately,
that
it was an observation, and
Yeah.
I can't find it in any judgment.
It's
But
not a written judgment.
Yeah, not in any, and it would completely undermine what the same judge said about this Act while deciding the Ayodhya case, where he said it's the part of the basic structure of India and prevents retrogression.
Yes. But
In fact, it's regrettable that he should have used this sort of language without making an order If he had put an order, then the world would have known what he actually said. Making these sort of observations in politically sensitive matters
Yes.
is very unfortunate.
So people say that this opened up a plethora of suits, especially in district courts, you know, people who wanted and then what happened in 2023 August is a non-invasive scientific survey of Gyanvapi Mosque was allowed, where the ASI says they found foundations, you know, of remains of a large temple.
I would interpret Chandrachud's not a judgment, but that sentence
Observation
is that he rightly said that you can investigate. What is the problem in investigating?
For what purpose, if I may ask?
Whatever purpose, for historical purpose.
But
Why
then-
should I not? And other thing is, under the Place of Worship Act, you cannot convert the character of the structure. Now, what is the character of the structure? Is the one which is standing above the ground, the one which is standing under the ground? What is the character of the structure?
It's the character of the structure in 1947.
So was the foundation not existing in 1947?
So, but you know, everyone knows the character of the structure in
No,
1947.
everyone. I am saying
They
there
are not supposed to make a historical inquiry into its foundations to say that that was the structure in 47.
Yeah, I guess the
It
entire
undermines the act completely.
Yeah, the whole
In
what
my
was the whole
perce-
point of this act, Mr. Chinoy? Why did our constitution makers think of having a provision like this? And also explain to us, now the petitioners are invoking the provisions like right to equality. How does that apply? I mean, could you just put it together for us that the petitions that are challenging the constitutional validity are invoking sections of right to equality, right to religion? How does that add up?
You know, just remember that this act was brought in 1991 to prevent this can of worms from being opened, in
Yeah.
effect. Because the minister who moved it stated that would undermine the concept of fraternity in the constitution if these sort of inquiries and these sort of reconstructs of history are taking place. And it was for that purpose that it was brought in, because not to use these issues to undermine the concept of fraternity in a multi-plural society. So this ultimately Article 14 and 25 and 28 frankly has little relevance to this sort of a situation. I have no doubt, I don't know, it's difficult to speak for the Supreme Court, but I do believe that if they believe in the concept of India as was constitutionally there, they will reject outright such challenges which are aimed at nothing less than undermining the concept of India and the constitution. Nothing less than that.
Will the right to equality apply in retrospect? Because
But
if
what
the
is the right to
community
equality
feels
here? The
that we were
equality-
discriminated, our temples were destroyed, therefore
But
in
that's-
retrospect will it apply? I'm
But
just
right
asking.
to
as-
equality doesn't mean you open up historical facts to destabilize the current. Where is the right to equality there? No,
Yeah,
this
because those are the sections which the petitioners
But you know,
have applied.
this is the case when really purely political issues are dressed up into law. Rightly so, because it's the law which deals with the political issue. So you answer it back by law. But neither the law nor its challenge is based on anything less than the political concept of the idea of India.
So, just another technical question. If it's an act, can't Parliament amend it themselves?
In fact, it's going to be a very peculiar situation. The present government constituted a party which opposed this act. It even today says that the act is bad. Let's see if the government has the gumption to get up and say that, well, strike down the act, we don't support it anymore because the world has changed in India.
Well, they don't want to be the bad cop, right?
They will have to say something.
They
can't
have to give
stay
a
quiet.
response.
Exactly.
The Supreme Court has asked them for a response, which at least on the day
And,
we're recording, they've not
The
given.
BJP has given its response. In
Okay.
fact, in its latest report, it said that the Congress was like the new Muslim League of India
Yeah.
because it supported the act.
Mr. Irfan, engineer, one question about what the act is criticized for. One of the points is that there's this arbitrary date, and something that Rajan Jaykar is also telling us. Why August 1947? How does that become a benchmark to decide what should be the character of a place of worship?
India became a democratic, free and democratic country on 15th August 1947. Before that, we were under colony. We were colonized by the Britishers. I can't understand how 15th August 1947 can be an arbitrary date. That's the time when we had accepted the inclusive approach of equality. I mean, the constitution was not yet framed, framing of the constitution
51.
was going on since 1946. Constituent Assembly was meeting since 1946, and it continued its work till 1949, 26 November 1949, when the constitution was
Signed.
finalized. The draft was finalized and signed by everyone. So, but on 15th August 1947, there was a vision of India that we wanted to build. And that day when India achieved its freedom is the date, because before that Britishers, we were a colony of Britishers, and Britishers decided our law. After this, Indian government had its might.
You're saying there couldn't have been any other date. That was
There
the
couldn't
only
have been
date
any
that
other
could.
day.
Can I supplement very
Yeah.
briefly on
Yeah.
this? In the judgment, in the Ayodhya judgment, the same Chief Justice Chandrachud explains that the constitution was the time when we opted for a secular polity, and it is therefore that after this there can be no reopening of the past to undermine fraternity.
Yes. The
That is
judge-
what he explains.
Yeah, and Justice Rohindra Nariman in his very famous speech even said one must refer to the last 5 pages of the Ayodhya judgment where they talk about the sanctity of the Places of Worship Act. Though they say Ayodhya is an exception, that we can't continue to dig up the past. But I had one last round of questions for people, like how does one find a solution? Okay, I mean, whatever the Supreme Court decides going to have far-reaching consequences. Already we're an overburdened judiciary, right? I mean, there's a huge backlog of cases. How many more cases can we deal with, asking for surveys, asking to determine the true religious nature? As it is, it's tariq pe tariq that happens in our courts. What is your view on that, Mr. Jaykar? Could there be a way of, like, maybe mediation or settling this outside the court?
No, the cases that you are talking about are not the normal run of cases which have originated from the lower court and come to the Supreme Court. To find out how to dispose the pendency is something which is a separate matter. But
Yeah.
merely because we are burdened with all these cases, therefore these kind of cases should not be allowed because we have got a backlog. That's no logic at all. I personally feel now, as I see the situation, right now the union government has been asked to say. Congress is in a dilemma. They were trying to keep quiet. Now suddenly they have swung and they have also become part of the fresh application that they have made. So they have made their point clear. So this is nothing but this is absolutely appeasement. It is so obvious that one cannot say that it is not appeasement. Everybody, all the Indie government have Muslim voters as their main voters because they have already acted in such a way that the Hindu voters are slowly not interested in them. So their only fallback is to appease Muslim voters, and that is exactly precisely that they are doing. So therefore a situation will come, in my personal opinion, whatever the stand union government takes, eventually if the Supreme Court does not strike down or something, this act will be repealed by the government itself. Full
May I
act.
just make one comment, because this is a common fallacy. At the highest, the BJP never got more than 37% of India's votes. Since Hindus constitute about 80%, there is a good 43% of Hindus that didn't vote for the BJP. But it's our first past the post that allows this to go on. And I don't agree with you on the logistics. The logistics of our judicial system and its burden is all very well. These issues are not capable of mediation because the two sides are diametrically different. They are versions of what India is going to be. There is no mediation in that.
So there's no possibility of any
It will be absurd.
compromise.
It's like the long talks that took place while Ayodhya was being discussed, which ended up in nothing.
Just
Don't
one-
forget the Allahabad High Court ended up with a three-way division in Ayodhya, which actually might be have been a better outcome than what happened in the Supreme Court.
That's another thing. What about joint worship in a place? Gyanvapi currently has joint worship. I know that both sides are a petition saying no, it should belong to just either side. But there are prayers that go on in the basement of Gyanvapi, and there is namaz that happens there in the rest of the mosque. What about that kind of solution? Do you think that will ever work?
That's an ideal situation wherever it works, wherever people agree to pray together, and there are many such institutions. All the Sufi dargahs are such places where
Muslims and Hindus and all pray together. We have Mahim Church. Every Wednesday during Navina, non-Christians and Christians and Muslims all pray together. So that could be an ideal solution. But let me point out to one more thing, countering Mr. Jaykar. BJP claims that the Muslim women vote for BJP. So it's not that Muslims vote only for Congress.
And it's a claim by the party.
Samajwadi Party, Congress, RJD, and also BJP. And therefore, let's see what stand BJP takes. Otherwise, in this 10 years, they would have repealed this act much before, much earlier.
Justice Verma made a beautiful quote when he discussed Ismail Faruqi. He said, following Jonathan Swift, we have enough religion to make us hate, but not enough to make us love one another.
So nice.
That's
I
so
think it's a
true.
lovely
And
conclusion.
one
that's
final
so
thing
true.
I would say, that at political level we should adopt, this act should remain as it is, and we shouldn't dig up and open. Supreme Court should reject. That's what my feeling is. But at social level, I think we should have something like Truth and Reconciliation Commission, or some efforts for truth and reconciliation,
Truth and reconciliation.
where we accept the wrongs of the past
Yeah.
Okay.
and
Totally
decide to rebuild a new India.
Just one burning question, which Afrida, which I want to direct at you as well as the panelists. Do you think a compromise would work? Because I have heard many people, many spiritual leaders say this, and towering intellects, spiritual leaders say that, how about you compromise on the Muslim community, just hand over Gyan Vapi, that's Kashi and Mathura, which is Krishna Janmabhoomi, and then you close it there. Do you think that kind of solution would work?
You're asking me?
Yes, I'm asking you also, and
I
what?
think let Mr. Jaykar
Okay, Mr.
answer that.
Jaykar.
No, but who are the people who are saying it? Is it the opinion of a majority, or is it only few people are saying
Few
this?
spiritual, like for example, I've seen a video of the towering spiritual leader Swami Chinmayananda, who's a great intellectual. He's no more. He
He
has
was
said,
my guru. He was my guru, by the way.
all right,
Yeah.
I respect him immensely. And this is why I'm bringing up what he said, because otherwise he has very different views. But in this video, he said that, I believe the Muslims should just hand over Mathura, Kashi, of course Ayodhya we have, but Ayodhya happened before, after he passed away. So he says Ayodhya, Mathura, Kashi are important because they were not built as places of worship. They were victory monuments to establish the dominance of the invaders. That was his point of view in that video. He talks only about these three mosques because in the Shastras, what we have in the Hindu Shastras is the Sapta Moksha Puri, 7 destinations which are very, very important for Hindus, including Ayodhya, Mathura, Maya, Kashi, Kanchi, Avantika, which is Ujjain, Dwaravati, which is Dwarka. They say these points are important. Keeping that in mind, he had spoken just about these 3 structures. But do you think that would ever be a viable solution, just to talk about these 3 main structures and then forget the rest? Close it there. Never bring it up again. Do you think that would ever happen?
Could be, if the majority wants to do that, yes, possible.
And who would decide to stop it then?
That's
Once you
the thing.
open that gate,
Yeah.
why the same question is how arbitrary? Why only 3?
Yeah.
Because it's Krishna Janmabhoomi and because it's Ram Janmabhoomi and because it's...
But each of them have different, different other places also have deep religious significances to others.
That's true.
Where would you draw the line?
But let me say one thing. We, as Indian Muslims for Secular Democracy, I'm the co-convener of that. Mr. Javed Anand is the convener, and there are others. We appealed on these lines that let us hand over Kashi and Mathura to the Hindu community, and let's hope that they will respect this. They will see this as a gesture of goodwill, and all other controversies about other places of worship will rest. We did appeal. We were mobilizing the Muslim community for that. Slowly, that was happening. Receiving some response, cautious response by people who mattered. But then Sambhal and Ajmer and all that happened,
So,
and then people felt that this will not stop.
No, because Anushka asked me this question, I'm just like sharing my personal view in this. And I feel that, you know, I find it so short-sighted that you have communities today who think that ibadat, worship is confined to four walls and you are clinging to it with your dear life, and as if that is demolished, your religion gets, you know, demolished or nothing changes. So when will we realize this is God is not confined to
May I only say one thing?
brick
The
and
Hindu
mortar?
is by and large secular.
Yes.
And because of the Hindu being secular, this country remained the way it was in the 50 years. It's the sense of grievance which has been injected by politicians
Yeah.
that has made a totally secular Hindu. The Hindu is not a violent
Yeah.
protagonist
Which is
of
the
religious
worry.
matters. That's why this country had this plural state.
Yeah.
Even the RSS chief Mohan Bhagwat said, why do you want to find Shivling under every
Absolutely.
mosque?
He said that.
Yeah.
And look at the pushback.
Yes, look at the pushback.
Pushback on
Exactly.
him. The Swamis all got together. They all said, who is he to say that? That might be your answer where you can draw a line under two.
Yes.
I don't know. Let's hope.
Let's hope we find a
Yes,
solution to this, because it really can have far-reaching consequences. Thank you so much to our panel, eminent panel, Mr. Jaykar, Mr. Engineer, Mr. Chinoy, Afrida
Absolute
Ali.
pleasure to have this conversation, Anushka, and thanks to you for bringing such bright minds and intellectuals here to our Free Press Journal studios.
Pleasure for us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.